When the U.S. beat the heavily favored Soviet Union in the 1980 Winter Olympics in Lake Placid, New York, they called it the Miracle on Ice. That same year, here in the Midwest, another miracle on ice was in the making.
It's just so hard to even put into words. You're thrilled. You're absolutely relieved. I was so excited. And then paired with, how can I accept this? Once again, how can I do this? I don't want Bill to have to go through this. Haven't I received enough?
That's three-time kidney recipient Carter Freeman. He's joined today by his friend, living donor and kidney ambassador Bill Boscow. I'm Sarah Jane Castro, Senior Director of Marketing and Communications for the National Kidney Foundation of Illinois, and your host for this edition of The Journey Continues. Carter, how did you and Bill first meet?
Hi, Sarah Jane. My recollection is we were in this old rickety weight room, freshman year of college. This was like the first couple weeks of school, so people are getting to know each other. And a lot of the folks up in the weight room were on the hockey team, and I was introduced to Bill. And from there, it's been a friendship for the last 45 years.
Wonderful. What was your friendship like in those early days?
A lot of laughs, a lot of fun. We immediately hit it off. It's good friends. Our parents were both big influences in our lives. And so we really appreciated family and just a great time to be together and being independent for the first time, at least for me, in college.
Right, yeah. So if you were both on the hockey team, did you have those classic 80s hockey mullets?
That came after, I believe. Okay, no mullet here.
Bill, what do you remember about Carter from those early hockey days?
Oh, boy. Well, first of all, the early hockey days, I remember being exceptionally jealous, Sarah Jane, at how good of a player he was. He's a great athlete as far as skating and so forth. We seemed to connect really quick when we met in the fall of 1980, and not just because of athletics, but also we went to school at a small liberal arts school in Vermont, Middlebury College, and Carter's from Minnesota. At the time, my family was from Georgia. And most of the student population at a school like Middlebury, not surprisingly, hailed from somewhere around New England, whether it's New York State, Boston, etc. So we, along with some other people, kind of gravitated toward each other because we shared the same situation of being, I don't want to say foreigners, but from different parts of the country, yet at the same time, we had a lot in common. Our love for hockey. We shared the same odd taste, I might say, for music. At least my wife would say that. And by the way, she too was a classmate of Carter and myself as far as back then. Anyways, we just had similar interests in mind, similar points of view, you might say. And then whether it's sports or you name it, theater, et cetera, you end up spending a lot of time together. So you really get to know each other. And that was, I think, the foundation of our friendship, which, as Carter mentioned, has lasted a long, long time here.
I understand being on the hockey team, being from New England and Minnesota, but how on earth did a boy from Georgia start playing hockey?
Well, and that might explain my jealousy of Carter's good skating habits in that I actually, prior to living in Georgia, Sarah Jane, my family lived in the Boston area. So when I was in grade school, from first grade through seventh grade before moving to Atlanta, that's where I learned how to play hockey at that time. And back in those days, this is predating you, obviously, the big bad Boston Bruins were in their prime with Bobby Orr, Phil Esposito, and so forth. So as a child in the Boston area, you played hockey. There was no question about it. It just was super, super popular back then. And then when our family moved to Georgia, just by coincidence, a lot of other families, Atlanta's a very transient community to this day. So I was fortunate enough to fall in with some families and boys that had moved from Boston or other cities from the northern part of the U.S. that also played hockey. So we had a pretty good hockey program down there with all transplants, you might say, into the area. And a lot of us aspired to play hockey in college. And that was my goal for the time that I lived in Atlanta.
Well, I grew up in Georgia too, but I grew up in much more rural Georgia, so we certainly didn't have any hockey teams. But Carter, when did you first learn something was going on with your kidneys?
My wife and I were expecting our first child. This was in, right around 1990, early 1993. So I went in to get some additional life insurance. Seemed like the normal thing to do if your family is growing. When I went in, I had a good friend who was kind of coordinating the deal, and after I'd given the blood and the urine, he called me back, a few days later and said, "Hey, I guess they're not going to give you any life insurance. You need to call a doctor." Like, what's going on here? So I made an appointment with a doctor, went in, and he said, "Well, you are going to need a kidney transplant someday. You have kidney disease and there's no way to stop it or cure it. We can try to slow it down." I was feeling good at the time. I was feeling great, living a normal, active life. So I was in a little bit of a denial. I suggested that he maybe check the vial and told him he had the wrong guy. But of course, he did not. It was about 3 years as my kidneys continued to decline. And despite doing everything I could, low protein diet and those kinds of things. So by 1996, I was pretty much on fumes, in need of a kidney.
What did that feel like? I mean, you're so excited about being a first-time dad, and then you learn you need a kidney transplant one day. How did that feel?
It was a bombshell to me. I mean, you're right. You're excited. You got your life in front of you and this new family, and so much uncertainty, so much lack of understanding of what a transplant was. I had never really heard much about it. I was envisioning just the stories you hear way back when about experimenting on monkeys and that sort of thing. I was clueless. I had no idea what to expect. And I think that was probably the hardest part with any kind of medical diagnosis is the uncertainty and not knowing what's ahead.
Right. Especially if you've had zero context for kidney disease. Did they give you any indication of what might have caused it?
Yeah, they said it was caused by IgA nephropathy. So that was the diagnosed cause and disease that I had.
Wow. You said it was about 3 years post-diagnosis before your kidneys were officially failing. Did you end up going on dialysis? Did you jump right into finding a donor? What did that look like?
Well, I was so fortunate. I mentioned earlier about our family, and our family is very close. And so I was super fortunate. Basically, I've got a brother and a sister and a mom and a dad at that point, and they were kind of battling each other out, which was just so hard to get your arms around. It's just such an incredible gift to receive. My sister only had one kidney, so they said, "I'm sorry, but very nice gesture, but can't do that." My dad had just been recovering from cancer, so he was working hard at getting in there, and they said, "That's not going to work right now." So ultimately, of course, my mom won that tug of war, and she ended up donating to me in 1996.
So it was pretty quick from needed a transplant till getting it.
It was. I was so blessed and so lucky not to have to go on dialysis. Obviously, that's a major, major benefit. And for anybody who's active or just enjoys feeling energy and warmth and strength and that, to be able to receive a kidney like that was amazing.
Yeah, that had to feel nice. But I understand that feeling of like, oh my gosh, this is overwhelming. Everybody in my family wants to do this for me. That's got to feel good and also like bring up a lot of emotions, I imagine.
It does. How do you say thank you? How do you even accept it? Yet at the same time, you want to live. How do you give back? How do you say thank you? All those things go through your mind, and you don't want the other person that you love to put themselves in any kind of risk. To this day, I mean, it's still something that, you have to deal with.
How long did that first transplant last before it was clear that you might need a second?
It was very strange. It lasted about 2 years. My creatinine just started kind of bumping up real slow, but pretty steady. And they tried all sorts of anti-rejection kinds of measures, but, it just continued to go downhill. And I remember my doctor saying, "Cal, I wish I knew what caused this." And anybody who knows me, I'm incredibly conscientious about the medicine regimen and being on time and taking everything. I mean, how can you be when somebody sacrifices like that for you? So it just happened. The body is trying to reject the foreign object in your body. And so it was really, really difficult to go through that then after this incredible gift. Again, it's part of the risk and one of the things that it's not a perfect science.
Yeah, it's different from person to person and donor to donor too, how the kidneys are going to respond and how your body will react and all of that.
Right.
What did you do when they told you hey, this kidney's not going to make it. It's time for another transplant?
Yeah, well, it's a bit of a process. It's 2 years of kind of watching it come to that end. So kind of back to where we were 2 years earlier, once again, this time my brother, raised his hand and said, I'm going to do this. At that point, I've already been through one of them. I saw it get rejected. I said, I can't do this. It took a long time for me to accept it. And finally he said, Carter, it's not for you, it's for me. So, he just, I'm sorry, it's
No.
emotional.
It is. I understand that. If my sister needed my heart, I'd give it to her.
Right. So, and, as I've said all along, probably the only thing that helps me to accept a gift like this is to know that I would do the same if the tables were turned. And so it was an amazing gift once again. And that one lasted 25 years. We have 2 kids. It got me through raising kids and watching them set out on a life on their own and being able to be healthy and productive and provide for the family and do everything I wanted to do. So it was just an incredible blessing.
It really is. That's wonderful. Yeah. So unfortunately, you got some similar news. When did you learn you'd need a third transplant?
It's kind of interesting because it's gradual. It's very gradual. And they said, this kidney has lasted longer than an average. The statistics will tell you. You just don't know how bad you feel. Do you know what I mean? It's hard to explain, but it's very gradual. And, I'm getting older and, things are more difficult for everybody. And, working hard. So isn't everybody tired? And I live in Minnesota, so isn't everybody cold all the time? But as we got near the last couple of years, I was really dragging. And, it's when you're out working or in public or with your friends or family, you rally and you try to give it all you have. And then you get home and you just pretty wiped out. But you want to give it all you have for your family and your wife and that sort of thing too. So it's a constant drain. I knew it was coming in the next year or two.
I've heard that from other transplant recipients. You don't know how bad you feel until later when you're feeling better. You don't realize that you were feeling that badly. How did it feel to be back in that place searching for another donor? And this time you don't have a sister who can give you a kidney. She's only got one. And I'm assuming at this age, your father probably couldn't either. How did it feel to be searching for a donor again?
I now understand how people feel who don't have any options in front of them. It's tough. It was really tough. Again, the idea of even just accepting a gift. It's kind of like, you know what? I've done 2. That's enough. Been a great life. Like I said, self-preservation, and you want to live and you want to be able to maybe make a difference for other people. It was really difficult. We actually went to National Kidney Foundation event, the Big Ask, the Big Give here in Minneapolis. We didn't know what we were going to do. The National Kidney Foundation, actually, we've been to a number of things over the last 30 years or so. It's been very, very helpful for us and connected us with some people who've been through similar experiences. So hats off to you guys for that. Talked a lot with my wife, Jill, and we don't want to ask anybody directly. How do you do that? I didn't know how to do it. I didn't want to do it. But I thought, we have so many wonderful friends in different groups, different areas, whether they're friends from work, friends from high school, friends from college, friends from church, whatever the case may be. And we thought, you know what? If we just let people in those groups know where I'm at. So like I said, some probably didn't even know how I was feeling, thought I was doing fine. So that's probably one thing to take away is people may not know that you're really struggling. So the best way to do this for us was we thought we'd send an email and we entitled it Kidney Champions for Carter. The ask of that group in that email was, would you consider being a kidney champion for me? We don't know what your circles are, but spread the word, forward this email. As I look back on that email, and by the way, I could not hit send on that email. I just couldn't do it. Maybe it's, again, people don't want to ask for help, but my wife could. And so she was my advocate in that sense. And so the email came from her and it was, hey, here's the situation with Carter. Number one, kind of a little background of my story. Number two was, here's what will happen next. There's really two paths to go down. He can receive a kidney transplant. And, here's a little bit about kidney. Didn't want this to be too long. Or he'll go on dialysis. And so just a little piece about what life is like on dialysis. The third part was, this would be our ask of you, if you're willing, is to spread the word to your circles, let people know. And so that was part three. And then the fourth part included some links on the National Kidney Foundation site. There was another kidney donation site. We were at the University of Minnesota. So there was a link to, here's the number, here's the link, if you want to fill out kind of an initial health screening form, and then they'll get back to you on that. And it's just a screening to even see if you're qualified to do that. And we sent it out. It was really incredible to hear. I'd have people call and say, hey, I just want you to know I went in, because as a recipient, nothing on the donor side. There's a steel curtain between the recipient and the donor side. So as a recipient, I didn't know anything, but I would have a friend, somebody call and say, hey, I just want you to know I filled it out, but, they turned me down because of this or that. So it was just incredibly heartwarming and amazing to hear that there was some reaction. And some of the folks on that list did send the information out to their people in their circles. That was the process we went through and kind of started the ball rolling.
I'm so glad that your wife was able to hit send on that email. That's important to have those champions.
Absolutely.
Bill, how did it feel for you to read that email?
We being both my wife and I, as I mentioned earlier, Sarah Jane, my wife Kimberly, Carter, and I were all classmates together in college. And Kim and I obviously saw the email, read the email, and had known prior to the email being sent, just because we keep in pretty good contact with the Freemans, that, things weren't operating on 100% as far as Carter's kidneys were concerned. Kim took action in that she was one of those people that Carter just referred to as far as filling out the screening form and so forth. And notably, I did not. To this day, I'm kind of scratching my head, honestly, wondering why I didn't. My dad had renal cancer back in the day, and I think that was a convenient reason, maybe, / excuse, that I chose to not fill out the screening form. I thought, hey, if one of my close relatives had renal cancer, I doubt that I would qualify. As it turned out, I was 100% wrong in that assumption. I'm like everybody else. I don't like needles and so forth. So I didn't fill out the screening form. However, Kim did, along with so many other people. After Kim filled out the form, she went through pretty much the whole process, the process meaning the evaluation process. She ended up using the baseball term, just almost making it to home plate, but just unfortunately was disqualified right at the, let's call it the bottom of the ninth inning, so to speak. And I can't remember the last test, which DQ'd her, but basically it was the test that gave the results of, hey, if this person were operating on just one kidney, would they be operating at X%? And she just missed the threshold on it. I'm racing a little bit forward from what your question was in terms of when we saw the email, it struck us because, hey, we're obviously well aware that Carter had had a couple of transplants before. Carter's a close friend of, again, not just mine, but also Kimberly's. And the other thing I'll add is that as a family, we had also seen firsthand kidney disease. As I mentioned, my dad had renal cancer. My mom was a type 1 diabetic, and one of the results of her disease is that she ultimately needed a kidney transplant. This is back in the mid-90s. So as a family, we had gone through the process. As it turns out, my sister ended up donating to her mother, and we were able to see the great results of that. So maybe more so than other people, we were familiar with, number one, the process, but also just the circumstances of a person that is dealing with kidney disease.
It sounds like I really should be talking to your wives. They're the two heroes of this story.
Always.
Yes.
Once Kim was disqualified, what was the catalyst that inspired you to get tested? Did your sister's donation have any sort of bearing on that?
It was actually two things. Number one, we were thinking that she would be selected, and maybe not as a direct donor, but for a paired exchange, because she was that far along and she continued to receive some pretty encouraging news from the University of Minnesota as far as how her test results were going. But when the news came that she was not going to be able to donate, that triggered in my mind that, gee, I should at least fill out the health screening form. The second item is that Carter and Jill's daughter was engaged at the time, and there was an engagement party up in Minnesota, which my wife and I attended. I remember when Carter answered the door, I was taken aback and just seeing the condition that Carter was in as far as, whether it was coloration, as weight loss. The poor guy had also fallen down the stairs. He was just beat up, absolutely beat up. After that weekend, when we arrived back home here in Chicago, that's when I called the University of Minnesota, filled out the health screening form. And after all the fits and starts that so many other people had in terms of throwing their hat in the ring, I just sailed through the process as far as the form and then the interviews with the donor coordinator folks and the various battery of tests and so forth, not just the physical tests, but, talking with the social workers, et cetera, et cetera. From that time on, it was a really quick process.
That's great. I'm especially glad to hear that since you two live in different states, as you mentioned, and that the testing process still sailed right along. That wasn't a hindrance at all.
No, not at all. As us three are here talking in terms of the audience, I think that's an important point that you just brought up in that, hey, we live in a day and age where it's great with digital online records where literally if I get a blood test and I live not too far from Evanston Hospital here in the Chicago area, that same day, the folks at University of Minnesota are able to see the results of that test, whether it's a blood test, a CT scan, et cetera. There really isn't, I would say, a distance factor.
That's wonderful. How did you get over your fear of needles?
As I mentioned earlier, my mom was a type 1 diabetic, so she was having to take insulin shots multiple times a day. So why on earth should I have any right of being afraid of needles? And once it became apparent that I was going down the road of being a potential donor, and at the time I thought, hey, paired exchange, the chances of being a direct donor are pretty remote. I finally was able to get over the needle thing and so forth. And hey, a lot of it is just with the great people that I was working with here, but also in the University of Minnesota, you develop a confidence that they know what they're doing. After a while, it was no big deal.
That's great. I'm glad to hear that. Carter, what did it mean to you when you learned that Bill was going to be your donor?
It's just so hard to even put into words. You're thrilled. You're absolutely relieved. I was so excited. And then paired with, how can I accept this? Once again, how can I do this? I don't want Bill to have to go through this. Haven't I received enough? I want to be a giver for once, not a receiver. So those two, opposing parts of my emotions were at work. But at the end of the day, with the idea that new life, I've been through it before. So that was probably one of the biggest differences for the first not on his. I knew what to expect. I knew that after receiving a kidney, coming out of surgery, it's literally suddenly warmth, energy, clarity of mind, just, all those things. And the creatinine starts going from, they're taking it every, several hours. It's at 9 or 8 or 7 or wherever you're at. And then it's 5, and then it's 3.8, and then it's 2.6, and then it's 1.4, and then it's 1.1, or, that kind of progression. It literally happens within a day or two. It's new life. And so at the end of the day, I was so relieved and felt like I had another chance at life once again.
Let's talk a little bit about surgery day. What were you both feeling going into surgery?
It's funny because I participated in interviews like this for the last, the transplant took place in October 23. I think this is the first time that I've been asked that question in the way that you asked it, Sarah Jane. By then, I wasn't nervous. I was actually, in one sense, looking forward to it. It's go time, so to speak. So I was looking forward to it from the perspective of just, hey, let's get it done and get it behind us and that sort of thing. There wasn't really a lot of, I wouldn't call it trepidation. Leading up to surgery, I thought, hey, it might make sense to do what I can to maybe lose a pound or two because I thought I'd be little sedentary afterwards, not being able to exercise and that sort of thing as much as I usually do. So over the 3 or 4 weeks before surgery, I was as busy as I could be as far as doing some running and biking and things like that, just trying to get in maybe a little better shape. I'm always intrigued by the medical profession, how they like to get going, as Carter and I say, at dark 30, showing up at 4:30 or 5 in the morning. And, by that time, it's just a blur. Yeah, there was some excitement in terms of knowing that, hey, this event is going to really make a big impact. And I also think it's important, again, trying to put myself in the seat of the listener, to understand that the University of Minnesota, and in this area, whether it's Rush or Northwestern, they do so many solid organ transplants, and they know what they're doing, and they have the process down so well that obviously the goal is, hey, by the time the day of surgery comes around, certainly the recipient is prepared, but so too is the donor, not just physically, but also mentally. They just do such a great job at prepping the individual.
Great. That's wonderful. Carter, what were you feeling surgery day?
Well, I was excited. Again, worried about Bill. He was amazing and did a lot to calm my nerves or address what I had in the back of my mind. Geez, is he having second thoughts? This is a big deal. It is go time, as he said. And, I remember getting a text from him, and something like, I'm so excited. I wish the 18th was now. He's like, let's go. And that was incredible. Just incredible. So made me feel really good. I was super, super excited, and I was really worried about Bill. And, anytime surgery, there's risks, you sign the waiver, right? So you worry about that. But as Bill said, they've done this a time or two.
Has your friendship changed at all since the transplant?
I don't think so. The transplant, it's not let's call it a transactional event, meaning, as you said, Carter, you're receiving something. Well, what do you give back? I would say that it transcends that. The act of the donation, the receiving of it, et cetera. At least from my perspective, we're pretty close to begin with from all the days dating back to, again, the 1980s. As you can tell, we tend to have a lot of banter and joke around quite a bit, and that certainly hasn't changed. If it's possible, yeah, you might say that we're a little bit closer, but we're pretty darn close to begin with. From a donor's perspective, it's kind of neat. It really is humbling, but also a privilege, and I would say an honor, where you get to wake up each and every day knowing that, hey, you're able to make a very extreme difference in not only the life of the individual, right, the recipient, but family, and for that matter, friends and so forth. And I feel like I have benefited in so many ways, but in terms of our relationship on many levels, Sarah Jane, I don't know that it's really changed a whole lot.
I love that you're still same old friends you've been for 45 years, done nothing to change that. Because, yeah, like you said, it's not transactional. How has the transplant changed your lives? Maybe it hasn't changed your friendships, but surely it's changed things living-wise.
For me, having gone through the process, and Carter, you mentioned earlier the Big Ask Big Give event. Sarah Jane, that's where you and I met about a month and a half ago, or I'm trying to remember, at Rush University. And I've become involved in the Kidney Foundation and some other parties as well, because I think having gone through the process, I have a message that I would love to communicate to those that might have received an email like we received from Carter's wife and might be considering, hey, donation, can I be a donor? What if I am selected to be a donor? One change you might say is I try to do what I can to broadcast, if asked, just in terms of what my experience has been, which has been really positive. The after the surgery, just how quick the recovery is. The fact that whatever I was doing prior to the surgery, I can do now. And also, I mentioned earlier, the support that I as a donor received before the surgery, that support continues after the surgery. Carter, you mentioned this earlier, that there is risk involved. One risk from a donor perspective is experiencing a hernia, which I've experienced a hernia and have had to have it repaired. So the important point there is, hey, can there be repercussions? Yes. I characterize it as nothing more than a nuisance. It's a hernia, for Pete's sake. So I think that's important too, as prospective donors. It's not like the communication, the support, or anything ends as of the date of surgery. Far from it.
Absolutely. What about for you, Carter? How's the life changed?
Well, it's changed me in it's kind of multifaceted ways. And Bill mentioned the impact on not only me, but family and friends. And that's such an important point. I think by now I've communicated that the physically feeling back to normal, feeling warm and energy and all those things. But just all the things that go around it. I just got back from a fishing trip with some really good friends. We're expecting our first grandchild in September. And my goodness, to be able to, have energy for a little kid is really exciting. And just to be able to be engaged with friends and family and be able to do some of those things that requires energy, that's been huge. The other part of it is just perspective on life. I mean, you can't go through these kinds of things without taking a step back, and maybe some of those little things that used to get to me don't get to me now. I still get frustrated and I still get impatient and all those natural human things, but just a realization of every day, just so lucky and so appreciative, and finding those things every day to just marvel at. That's been a huge result of going through a life-changing event like that.
Yeah, I love that perspective. Well, before we wrap up, is there anything we missed that you want to talk about, share with our audience?
Bill just touched on the paired exchange. Essentially, if Bill were not a match for me, and there was somebody whether it's the same state or another state, who had a donor who also was not a match for that person, but Bill was a match for that particular recipient, and that donor in the other state was a good match for me, that's the idea of the paired exchange. Just from my communications with my transplant team, that's really, really been a growing and really important part of the transplant process, and getting more people, more kidneys out there. And so certainly a wonderful option. If somebody says, I want to save this person's life, but I can't do it directly, but I can if I donate over here to this other person, then really you are still saving that person's life. So I just think it's an important distinction. And as Bill said, the fact that he was such a good match and could be a direct donor, I think that was really important and really fun for us. We can get our kidneys together now when we get together, let them talk a little bit. So it worked out great, but it's certainly a great option if the donor is not a good match.
Absolutely. That paired donation is such an amazing thing they've started doing in the last 20 so years of saving more lives. Like you said,
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
Yeah. The other thing I would add, Sarah Jane, is I was able to have my wife, Jill, as an advocate. I think it's really important for people to have an advocate. And then from that, our email created more advocates. It's really hard to ask, but there's people that love you out there.
Absolutely.
From the advocacy standpoint, just again, having gone through the process, and that if you're evaluated to donate, whether it's a paired exchange or direct donor, it's important to understand that, hey, obviously the folks that are making that evaluation have all the tests at their disposal to make sure that as a donor, you can subsist and live a full life just fine with one kidney. So that's number one. Number two, those that might be listening to this that are potential donors, the support from the group that, I don't know if, Sarah Jane, if this is the same group in Illinois, it's called Donor Shield, that they provide as far as expenses that are incurred. And everyone's situation is a bit different, but from a financial standpoint, there was no expense for me. None. I think that's important. And the recovery time, aside from not being directed not to lift a lot of weight, but to be up and about, returning to work was really quick. The last thing I'll say is that I think it's very useful to have a mentor. I was super fortunate. I had my sister to lean on. She donated her kidney back in the late 90s. Here we are in the mid-2020s. And the advances that have been made in terms of the whole transplant process itself, it's much less invasive, and therefore the recovery time is much, much quicker than the transplant process involved, again, back in almost the dark ages, in the late 90s. So I think that's important, too, for potential donors to realize.
And now, as one of our kidney ambassadors, you are one of those mentors and advocates for other people considering this option.
Hey.
Thank you for doing that.
Of course.
Thanks so much to Carter Freeman and Bill Boscow for sharing their beautiful friendship with us. If you'd like to learn more about kidney transplants or living donation, visit the National Kidney Foundation of Illinois website at nkfi.org. I'm Sarah Jane Castro, and this is The Journey Continues. Prevention is a key part of our mission at NKFI. That's why at the end of each episode, we offer a health tip.
Here's today's health tip on maintaining your weight. Eating healthy, nutritional meals is good for everyone, especially if you have a family history of diabetes, high blood pressure, or other conditions associated with chronic kidney disease. When filling your plate, try to have 2/3 of it colorful fruits and vegetables. Fresh and frozen vegetables are preferable over canned due to added salts or sugars. If you only have access to canned fruits and veggies, be sure to rinse them before adding them to your plate. Prioritize lean proteins like poultry, fish, and beans over red meat or pork. And don't forget to check food labels. Sauces, dressings, and breads can be sneaky sources of extra salt and sugar. By keeping your weight under control, you can help your body prevent the development of diabetes, high blood pressure, and chronic kidney disease.